around, and I really hope you enjoy this short session. Over to you, Claudio.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, so my name is Claudio. I'm actually a lean and agile management consultant. I've been for many years. That's how I met Steve as well. But as Steven was actually saying, I work with a lot of startups. In fact, for the last 5 years, I've been working with one of the top corporate startup accelerators in the world, top one in Europe. Meaning, pretty much, I've been helping big companies like, say, Nestle, Lavazza, Eni, Purina, whatever, to launch corporate startups, right? So when they traditionally, all these startups, all these companies, they have like big launches. They spend maybe years like preparing a product launch. And, if you believe the statistics, most of these launches in the end fail. And so, you need to work in a completely different, with a completely different mindset. It is a so-called territory of extreme uncertainty. Okay, we don't have a customer, which sometimes I feel acts like product owners very often act like how can I say waiters, right? They take the order from the customer and they serve it, and they take the order. Sometimes you don't even know who the customer is. Having said that, I would like you, and we will talk about this, I would like you to consider also the fact that as a coach, I also quickly realized that the territory of extreme uncertainty is not just when you launch a new product in the market, where you can't predict the outcome until you do, but also how people react to change within an organization. Okay, so I would like to begin to think in these terms. Anyways, okay, being a lean practitioner myself, I've often found myself quoting this one, right? If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have the time to do it over? Have you ever heard this quote? I'm sure, right? I even put like this kind of sort of paternalistic, yeah, you don't have time to do it right. And however, at some point, and this is because maybe the domain in which I find myself more often, I also realize that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, if you don't make time to do it over, how will you learn what right even means? Okay, sometimes we know what right means. In a lot of instances, you don't know what right means. Okay, and don't talk to me about the voice of the customer. It's underdeveloped. I would say that part. Okay, so let me go back then to a story that you probably all know. Once upon a time, there was a speedy hare who bragged about how fast he could run. Tired of hearing him boast, slow and steady, the tortoise challenged him to a race. And as the race began, the hare ran fast down the road, leaving the tortoise far behind. The hare then paused to take a nap, thinking there is plenty of time to relax. And so the tortoise walked and walked until she reached the finish line. We all know this story, right? And what's the morale of it? After that, the hare always reminded himself, don't brag about your lighting pace, for slow and steady won the race. Why am I talking about slow and steady? Why am I talking about the tortoise? Because the tortoise is a symbol of the relentless effort of true lean organizations. Let me move sideways. So why, when we talk about the lean tortoise, we talk about continuous improvement, plan, do, study, adjust, go slow to go fast, right? That's the idea. It's often called Toyota is called the lean tortoise. Okay, go slow to go fast, relentless. It's about lean systems thinking. So problems, you don't treat problems in isolation. They're part of a system. So you work on improving the systems. It's about understanding where the complexity is, subdividing it, and reducing it. It's evidence based, right? We often hear and read about scientific thinking. Okay, we're talking about facts here all the time. And I like to think that we put the investigators out. So we're observers, right? We're the the scene of the murder, the murder scene, I guess, is the problem and the process that led to those problems. So you put the hat of an investigator, you use analysis basically. And the system here is a process that you observe. And then finally, we have easier, better, faster, and cheaper, according to Shingo in that order. Okay, I hope for a few of you who have been practitioners in Lean, it should sound quite familiar. Now, Lean provided many tools to obliterate the competition. This in particular is value stream mapping. Under that, we have some enterprise architecture. It's actually something I've done many, many years ago. This particular project, I changed everything, but the idea there is you go from concept to cache. You look at the process. In this case, was doesn't matter what it was, but basically you take the process that is making the most money. That's what I did back then, and analyze the value stream. You have touch time, non-touch time, value adding time, non-value adding time, and you try to reduce the time that it takes pretty much to get there, right? Okay, but anyways, like there's a lot of tools that Toyota created, and but I argue that that's only part of the story. It's only part of the story because famously, this probably will never happen. It never happened, but it's an urban legend, right? A journalist goes to the Toyota manager and says, "Why do you allow your competitors to copy all your tools? They come there, they visit, you show them value stream mapping, 5S's, whatever, Kanban, and so on. Why do you allow them to copy all your tools?" And the manager responded, "What they need to see is not visible." What the hell is he talking about? Okay, what the hell is he talking about? Basically, what he's talking about is that, I'm going to tell you my version of Lean, which I learned with, many years of studying Lean, working with customers. I've been a Toyota supplier as well. And, but this is my understanding as Italian living in Ireland. I learned it from the Americans who translated from Japanese. So probably our understanding of Lean, probably there's a lot of stuff that is lost in translation. Let's assume that it's a probability, I guess, right? What they need to see is not visible. What is he talking about? Well, Lean, this is a fact, created the legions of problem solvers and critical thinkers. If we think the best definition I have of Lean is this one, from Mike Rother, it says Lean is the permanent struggle to flow value to one customer. There's a lot packed into this sentence. I'm not going to unpack it all, but really, first of all, to one customer, what it means that, again, in Toyota, we make millions of cars, but the customer only buys and cares about the one that he bought, right? It doesn't care if stuff is accumulated along the way. It doesn't care about your processes, right? It just wants to buy and cares about that one car. So we're talking about flow optimization. Some people talk about reducing waste. My understanding, at least in the software kind of view of Lean, we focus more on the flow of value, and it's a permanent struggle, basically, right? It's never ending, right? Because Toyota, even when you think about drilling the screws for to put in a wheel, okay, they are looking at, can we reduce that time? Because if you could get away with it, you would get away with it, right? So it's a permanent struggle, right, to one customer. So that's what we're trying to do, flow value. Now, some of you may have heard of A3 thinking, and I think that's the real key to understanding a lot of what goes behind like Lean beside the various tools, right? So we copy all the tools. This is what happened. We copy all the tools, but actually it turns out in Toyota, I know for a fact, again, that a lot of managers, top managers, would not know how to do value stream mapping. But they all trained in A3 thinking. Okay, and maybe you're using the make or whatever. It doesn't matter. The thing is, right, they are all trained in doing this. Why A3? It comes from the format of the paper that is often used to capture the story of a problem as it unfolds. This again is a really old A3 I built ages ago. Okay, so again, it starts, there are the background, current situation, the expectation. Now we have a gap. That's the problem. Now we create a little step to move and reduce the gap. Then we do analysis, root cause analysis. We find the one or more potential root causes, countermeasures, and so on, right? So the idea there is, they're all different, but in a way they follow this kind of process. Okay, so you tell the story of a problem, and you tell it in a very visible way. The idea there is that you don't write this kind of explanation in just one sitting, right? It won't take 10 minutes. Sometimes it takes weeks, right? Because the story of the problem evolves with your understanding. And usually we say it takes two people to do A3 because basically you have a problem solver. And I've done a lot of that where basically I would be either the problem solver. Often I would do pair problem solving with someone else. Say, Steve, we work together, we do pair problem solving, we see an issue, we do pair problem solving, we write it down. But after a while, I also act as a mentor where, say, Steve, we work together, or maybe someone new who actually complains about problems, who say, how about we solve the problem together? Right? So you start with this pair problem solving, and it's a way of coaching basically, because you have on one side, you have the problem solver. So if you're not doing pairing, you're actually doing this kind of, after a while, you have a problem solver, you have a mentor. The job of the problem solver is to solve the problem. The job of the mentor is to develop the problem solver. Yeah. And so how does it work? I just write maybe the first part. I go down to my mentor. The mentor looks at it and starts asking Socratic questionings. Socratic questioning, right? What would you say if somebody said this? What evidence do you have? What would what are the consequences of this statement and so on? And so basically, when the mentor would tell you what evidence do you have, again, you're going back to the Gemba where the work actually happened to say, I don't know enough about it. And that's why it's written in pencil, and that's why it's written and rewritten multiple times. And you start one step, then you verify, next step, you verify, and so on. This is the way, that's the tortoise, it's slow and steady. Okay, so that's the idea. Good. So, we have this concept in Lean called value stream. Again, as I said, from concept to cache, to idea to cache, from order to cache, probably you heard as well. And usually you have the people who are operating on the system. They are working on the value stream, basically. These are the ones I will put on top. This is what Lean really does, right? Who's helping them? These are the cogs in the machine. Who's helping them? Well, the team leads, right? Team leads are helping the team to go through. Well, but they have like a narrow view, right? They can possibly see only what is there within their team. Who's helping them? It's management. It has to be. This is at least in the lean view of the work. And now suddenly we have our pyramid is completely reversed. I worked with companies where we did reverse the pyramids. The CEO was at the bottom. Okay, just to say, I'm there to serve. That's what it means to be a servant leader. Okay. But learning to see involves bringing to the surface what we learn. So I created this concept, which I call learning streams. So we have a value stream and we have a learning stream. It's like a ladder, right? You need both in a way. Why am I saying that? Because very often in firefighting organizations, the heroes are the firefighters. And the reason is the ones who are making progress, they are trying to remove problems and prevent problems to happen, are completely under the radar. They're ignored. And I think is a human tragedy to begin with. So when you start bringing to the surface the how they address problems, you can actually see, wow, they're actually mature. I love this, right? I want to see. And so very often you will show Kanban boards or A3s or whatever to the managers to actually show the kind of work that these teams are doing. Okay, so I've seen a lot of reversal in terms of the culture of an organization, starting as firefighting and basically they are the heroes because they address the fires, they put off the fires, but they are the ones who actually maybe create them in the first place, right? With all these workarounds and whatever. But doing it in this way, you bring the learning stream to the surface. This is, again, I want to start thinking in terms of what they need to see is not visible, make that visible. And the other thing is, you may also consider the fact that in Toyota, they had specific problems. So the Americans came there, copy their tools without understanding what led them to the creation of those tools. Now, if you understand the principles behind, well, welcome to the actual world of lean, where you understand that you have problems that are possibly different from Toyota, completely different from Toyota. You may come up with new tools. Okay. That to me is the lean thinking, lean culture, lean mindset. Okay. Okay. So lean brought operational excellence to many companies. Um, However, and unfortunately, I learned the really hard way, going very operational excellence in a very operational excellence way in the wrong direction, burning what today would be $25 million, But we learn a lot. That's the usual thing. Back then, we didn't have the models. We had models for operational excellence, but we didn't understand a lot of stuff. So operational excellence, I would argue, is simply not enough. And it depends on, again, in the domain in which you work, right? So in a traditional organization, maybe you know everything, and you may just ask the customer, and you're going to be successful. However, times evolve, and I say operational excellence is simply not enough. Usually works this way. There's a product owner, product manager, product management team, whatever you call it. They're humans. So they come with an idea, and very often is a crap idea. Okay, there's mild unity here, mild nudity here, right? Where, what's worse about this, I have a strong background in software development, for example. So you may have an idea in software development, and now you have the developers who are actually building it, they're implementing it. Okay. And then we go to the next level where, people within the team, they improve it at different levels. They do quality assurance. But this is what happens, right? And this is what we serve to the customer. Then, without naming names, Steve comes in and says, let's do value stream mapping on this one. I'm just kidding. I've done it myself as well. We do a value stream mapping. We see the touch time, non-touch time. I probably wouldn't touch this. We reduce the timeline, and all we're doing is going faster, still delivering the same thing. Okay. Obviously, I'm generalizing here, and there's a lot of if and but. Okay, but that's the idea. So basically, what happens? Let me take myself out. Okay, so we have lead time and all that kind of stuff that we are very familiar with, at least within this network. I would assume. And in other words, I didn't say that, but I empathize with that. If you get good at delivering shit faster, you just get a lot of shit. Okay, so but you could say, Claudio, lean is not just about being faster. I just explained what I believe lean is, right? Is the thinking behind. So I agree with you. However, right, it's not just about being faster, it's about being cheaper. Yeah, this one is on sale. It's better quality. This is organic and incrementally innovative. You know what? It's on a stick and it's got pointy stuff, but it's still what it is. Then we serve it to the customer, and the customer is going to give money to who? He's going to give money to someone who's most likely than not is faster, better, cheaper, and whatever than you, right? With all this kind of evolving, you see AI now, you see a lot of technologies basically that there's always someone who is better than you in another part of the world very often. But the problem is not even that, is that often there's people who are not necessarily better on these metrics. They actually play a different game and they are different. It's a different kind of competition. They manage to help accomplish what the customer actually needs to accomplish, maybe in a completely different way. And that's the dilemma in innovation, for example, that you have like completely different products and they manage to address some of the issues you have. Let me give, it's called Jobs to be Done, by the way, and let me give you a very specific example that I used to do like a long time ago. You take airlines, right? Before, if I had to have a big meeting in the US, like a strategic meeting with someone, I would have to take an airplane, go to the US. And now I'm faced with a lot of options, right? Which one is faster? Which one is cheaper? Which one is this? Which one has got a more convenient time for me and whatever. And then Skype came out. Okay, Skype is not even an airline, right? What's the story? Well, the thing is, right, I can make some concessions and say it's not face to face, but it's good enough for those kind of meetings. And now suddenly I competed with all these airlines. You see where we are? This is the dilemma of innovation, that I'm trying to accomplish a job and the solutions come and go. The job is almost the same, right? I still need to have these kind of meetings, but I'm giving priorities to certain elements rather than others within that job. And because of that, I'm getting someone that is completely different. Trust me, I lived it in my own skin as well when I used to work in Siemens when I was back in Italy. We had a competitor who came out of nowhere from New Zealand and was 10 times faster, 10 times cheaper. Right? Long time ago. Okay, so no matter how hard we try, we're still wide open to disruption. We do live in turbulent times. Technology and society evolve faster than most organizations' ability to adapt. New regulations, new knowledge discoveries, exponential technologies, again, AI, new trends, global competition, consumers are more and more sophisticated. Everything is on the move and everyone is in trouble. I would actually argue even the wise lean tortoise. Right? Stephen, we will also say maybe not a lot of companies are actually doing lean properly. That's fair. But I would say nobody's safe in this world. I, for sure, am not. Okay. So the thing is, like, how can we make sense of such complexity? I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's important to understand the context and why what I'm about to tell you is not completely crazy. Okay. Which is this one, right? There is a framework called the Kinevin framework from a complexity expert called Dave Snowden, who basically says there is a central domain. When you have a problem, you put it at the center. It means you don't know where you are. But quite quickly, you end up saying, okay, where is this problem or part of this problem? It may be a problem that is in the so-called obvious domain. Okay, and these are kind of progressive. Okay, I don't want to think in terms of quadrants where we put them. It's more like we progressively we can go from an obvious, essentially how to cook an egg is probably there's an obvious way to do it. There's definitely a recipe to do it. That recipe is context unaware. Will probably work everywhere in on Earth, I guess. Maybe in space will be a different context. Okay, but having said that, this is probably a best practice on how to cook an egg, and that's the recipe. Best practice as in there's only one that is the best, and you understand which one it is. And so the strategy there is you sense what kind of problem you have, and based on that, you say, okay, this is obvious, I know how to do it. And basically you categorize it, basically you find what recipe applies to this, and you just apply it. I hope it makes sense. Okay. I'm looking at Steve. I see the nodding. Okay, good. We're in the good path. The next one is the complicated domain. Okay, this is actually the domain of the experts. This is us, right? We know what we don't know, and we have options, and we look at basically based on the problem. If we have enough time, we will address this. The strategy is we use analysis, right? We do the root cause analysis. What kind of problems are we talking about? Technical problems are one of them, right? So deep, difficult technical problems, say a Boeing 747, I can break it into parts, identify where the root cause or the root causes actually are for a specific problem, create countermeasures. This is where the A3 thinking stuff, and systems thinking goes into. I fix the problem with countermeasures. I put it back together. I still have, so I use analysis here, right? Analysis meaning I'm looking for, there's a cause and there's effects, okay? And And basically, I put it together and I have back my airplane. In this field, we don't talk about best practices. When I see websites that talk about best practices, I kind of run, as in, I'm kind of afraid because even the best practices that I used in software development like 20 years ago are laughable today. I mean, seriously laughable. Okay. So, anyways, so we analyze and then we respond based on the kind of idea that we have. This is the world of the experts. Okay. That's where the expertise goes. Fortunately or unfortunately, there is another domain which is called complex. This is where you don't know what you don't know. Okay. When you don't know what you don't know, for example, launching a new product, or as I said before, how people react to change in an organization. You don't know what you don't know. You can plan it forever. I don't know how Steve woke up today. Okay. And I may propose the same thing, a day before would have been all great. Today, I see the face is in a bad mood. And so, it may actually not accept that change. And this is also why a lot of big change initiatives fail, right? Because you plan it all, but you need the contact in the field basically to see the kind of reaction that you get. So you don't know what you don't know. What's the strategy? Well, the strategy there, it's probe, sense, and respond. This is not the airplane. This is mayonnaise. It's organic. In fact, actually, this kind of idea of organic, right? You can't break it apart. Basically, by definition of this domain, you cannot find the root causes. You can only find them potentially in hindsight afterwards. There's too many variables, right? It's just too difficult. And, we're talking about organic matter. This is where people often are involved, right? And because people are involved, and again, a lot of technical problems may be complicated, but they have some aspects that are complex. So, also you need to understand that maybe there are different strategies for part of the problems. Anyways, we talk about emergent practice there because basically you don't even know what a good practice is. You need to try it and see what basically works. And although it's actually not a complex system, you may imagine it's a little bit like playing chess. I make a move, wait for the next move. Then I make the next one, make for the next one, and so on. Okay? So you need to probe. What is also another name for probing? Experiment. Okay, small, fail, safe to fail experiments. Okay, finally, chaotic. Well, chaotic is you can't possibly know what is what. So unknowable unknowns. That's pretty much where people like say it's your house on fire. Okay, so your house is on fire. You don't think about like theory and yeah, let's do analysis or whatever. You move yourself outside. Yeah, you move away. You look at it, and then eventually you respond. If you think a lot of autocratic leaders, let's not mention names, Trump, for example, they like to create this kind of idea of enemy at the gates, right? Why? Because they're trying to create this kind of chaotic environment where the only option there, the best option, is to act. So you need to be a dictator because you need to take big decisions, okay? So at least in the chaotic environment, basically it's a temporary domain, complexity domain, meaning pretty much either your house burns down or it doesn't, right? But it's not constant, right? It's not the permanent one. And finally, you may also consider the fact that these elements and these domains within a problem evolve over time. They're not fixed. So, for example, I'm Italian. So I don't know what you know about Italians driving, but I'm a driver and we are the best drivers in the world, of course. So for me, driving is obvious. And I don't care if you don't agree. Okay, that's fine. So driving is obvious. And but then of course I'm in the middle of the motorway and say the engine breaks down. And now I find myself, in a very chaotic like environment. Oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I call the expert. I call my wife. My wife says, well, call the real expert, which is the mechanic. And for the mechanic, he's the expert there, right? So complicated, it would be a complicated domain, right? He knows where to find the problem and eventually finds it. So you see, like over time, it kind of changed, right? This kind of domain. So you may consider that as well. Well, it turns out a lot of experts would agree complexity experts would agree that a lot of organizations are complex adaptive systems. So a lot of the problems that we face are not in the complicated and obvious, they're actually complex. And you will see sometimes that some companies put and enforce some very policies that are global, and you would say, but this does not apply to us or whatever, right? And that's because they're in their mindset, the domain is obvious. Applies the same thing applies to everything within an organization, right? So obvious, yes, it would apply on everything. However, there are very few problems that are obvious. The majority of problems end up between complicated and complex. Okay, so something to consider. So, anyways, given this, I wonder how can individuals and organizations move fast, learn faster, and thrive under uncertainty, given the world, the turbulent world where we are. So we want to improve, right? Sometimes I do that in big conferences, right? Do we want to improve? I raise the hand, and some people don't, which worries me, right? They don't want to improve. Okay, but improvement without change is impossible. Who says that? Is not the genius, it's me, right? Doesn't have to. I like to quote myself from time to time. So improvement without change is impossible. To me, is a self-evident idea, right? We all want to improve, but how do you know if something that you're doing is actually improvement? Well, you start by changing. So most of us think about change, however, as big, slow, and scary. This is Godzilla, those kind of big change initiatives. And, they are big change, slow and scary. I think people are right to be afraid of those initiatives. The ones that usually they last like a few months, 6 months maybe. And then there's a new one and a new one. Let's try lean. Let's try agile. Let's try this. Let's try, whatever. But the question is, what if we could make it infinitely small and learn to evolve fast, almost as fast as a microorganism? I actually learned once, that was way before COVID, that there are some organisms that evolve every 15 minutes. There's a new generation every 15 minutes. What if we could do that? Evolve that fast? So here's a mad thought. If change is hard, make it continuous. The harder it is, the more continuous you make it. The smaller you make it, the more safe to fail you make it. Now, in software development, I won't bore you with software development, but we have this kind of concept of continuous integration where basically I used to write my own features. My teammates would write their own features. And then, we put them all together. At the end of the year, we have everything ready. Of course, you put everything together, it's full of bugs. And project manager would say 90% done, 90% to do, right? Because obviously my bugs conflate, his bugs, her bugs, and we put them all together and then it becomes unmanageable, right? So someone smarter than me decided, well, you know what? If it's hard, why don't we do this integration? Why don't we put stuff together more often? And so basically now we are at the point where we start with monthly builds, nightly builds, and now continuous builds. I write something, there's automatic testing, and basically I know all the time. This is small change. Now we learned that in software. Why don't we do it for change? Why? I find it peculiar. So trying to reward, and you go home with this, right? That would be the presentation. Make it continuous. However, trying to rewire the human brain, I know it's difficult. Simply because I said it, you're not going to do it. And or because someone is right doesn't make people do it, basically, right? So I find that the better option is to act on the system, that is the environment in which decisions are made. And the question is how. Enter Park and Flow. So Park and Flow captures a pragmatic, anti-fragile philosophy. There's a lot packed into this, but I will explain a couple of things here. So it starts with this kind of observation that, or point, I guess, inertia is our enemy, where inertia is our tendency to do nothing and to remain unchanged. What I often say is that life is made of choices, but we don't choose very often. We take the default options. We don't actively think about this. We just go with the flow. And in doing that, we take what's nice and easy, and but in doing that, we act like zombies. And the only reason we don't, and we're surrounded by zombies, by the way. So the reason we don't see it, we live in zombie land. The reason we don't see it is because they look like us and because it is us. It's us internally. It's not us versus others. It's actually us against ourselves. Inertia is our enemy. As a consequence, here's the principles, right? If change is hard, make it continuous. We already just talked about this one. Now, this one, it's not only what you do, but also what you learn by doing it that matters. Value stream and learning stream, they create like a ladder. To make progress, you need both. That's what I see, make them visible, basically. A shared opinion is a fact until it's not. I call it fluid knowledge. Basically, is to say, differently from lean, by the way, you know what? If in my case the code sucks, it's an opinion. It's a very opinionated opinion, right? You may disagree with me, but if we all agree, let's treat it as a fact for now, until we realize that actually there's a different problem. So as you see, it's not scientific at all. I'm not pretending this is scientific. It's based on complexity. We're in complexity theory. We understand that um, opinions basically matter. You cannot take away the personal point of view out of a system. Okay, so it's not fail fast, fail often. It's learn fast, learn often. You can still see me, I guess. Skateboarder principle, basically. Okay, it doesn't matter. It comes from lean startup, I guess. And then finally we have small bets, big payoff. Not all experiments are valued the same. There are some experiments that have huge payoffs. Okay, and this is part of the anti-fragile philosophy. Now, a lot of people who know about Pock and Flow, they actually know it not so much for the principles as usual, but from the 7 steps decision cycle, which goes in this way: problems and observations, options, possible experiments. So imagine steps like that, right? Committed, ongoing, review, next. The beginning of each step makes the word popcorn, hence the name Pock and Flow. Should I say I'm a genius? I'm a genius, right? Because before it used to be my own, Claudio's way of doing stuff and experiments and this and that. I just changed the name of a couple of columns in my boards, and I suddenly realized, oh, that makes the word popcorn. And now it's a thing. Okay, so it starts with problems and observations. Time. Who doesn't face customers who actually say, oh, we don't have time? But time, piles of work, aggressive deadline, we're slow to deliver, quality sucks, decisions take forever, innovate how, we're so reactive, we work in silos. I could go on and on and on, right? This is me, I guess, as an entrepreneur, where you learn that, like storytellers, they find stories along the way. As an entrepreneur, you understand that somebody's problem is somebody else's opportunity. And so I'm tuned for problems, right? That's what I really hear all the time. So in this case, I find basically that problems is an easy entry point to hack into the system. What is the system? Well, in complexity theory, the system is not only the process, as you would see in lean, I guess. The system is actually the people as well. It's us. People are involved in it, right? So we think about globally into the system. How do we hack that? By starting with problems. So, for example, a problem could be we don't fully understand what customers are trying to accomplish with our product. It could be something else, right? It could be, I don't know, it takes too long to deliver this product. It doesn't matter. The thing is, like, in a way, this is not really factual, right? It's something I'm probing right now. I'm saying I believe this is the case. And in fact, I'll put my avatar there saying I might be wrong. Okay, but if we share that opinion, let's treat it as a fact. So a problem is not a problem. It's a perception that something is a problem, that within our team, I guess, we prioritize it. We want to act on it now. We all agree and we want to act on it now. So a perception. So then we use shared observations to create and elicit options. Rule of 3, paraphrasing Virginia Satir, basically says if you only have one option, you have no option. 2, you have a dilemma. 3 or more, you have a world of possibilities. So it could be conduct. Doesn't matter if you know what they are, but anyways, jobs to be done interview, basically customer interviews to understand. I know why I built this. I actually did a lot of those, right? I know why I built this product. What I don't know, and I have theories, but I don't know why you're buying it. What were you? What were you doing? What led you to this choice? How are you using them? And so on. Right? All this information we take for granted sometimes, but it turns out that very often I found that suddenly you find new markets simply because people are misusing your product, as in using it for other stuff. that you wouldn't expect. Run customer journey mapping sessions to understand how they navigate the product, or maybe how they do their own process, right? How do they do that? Where are the stumbling points? Maybe test different messages to see what resonates with most users, right? Again, in innovation, we would do that a lot. We create offers, and if it's a B2C, we don't even care. We create like a fake brand. Basically, we launch some offer, and they click on it, and we say we're not ready yet. But leave your email; you'll be among the first to try it. I know some people will disagree with that approach, but the problem with humanity here is that we build too many things that nobody wants, and we need to learn how to deal with that. We can ask, or we can actually see their behavior, right? So anyways, promising options lead to a backlog of possible experiments. So experiments basically are to say, well, among these options, which one do we like the most? Which one do we want to try, basically, right? And we create a backlog of possible experiments. And experiments, a subset of them we commit to, right? And we say, what can we do this week or next week? So we create an experiment as a small step, concrete step to explore one of those options. So experiments that we commit to pursue have an action, reason, expectation, and review date. So with this kind of example, we do 5 jobs interviews. The reason is the problem because we don't fully understand what the customers are trying to accomplish, but we have expectations as well. At the end of the experiment, what we expect? Well, we will have identified that we identify what really customers are trying to accomplish. Maybe we uncovered unexpected uses and whatever. Okay. Some of them are totally perception, right? I can actually say at the end of the job, I think the team will like it. So we introduce maybe some Kanban pool system, right? And the expectation is we'll try it for a couple of weeks. At the end of the couple of weeks, I expect that we like it and we want to continue using it. And we reduce maybe the lead time, blah, 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 right? It's an experiment. Rather than say, I know how to do Kanban. I know this cool system. There we go. I have the truth. And then you have like sales, it's like being a salesperson, right? You're trying to force people to buy into it. You say, how about we run an experiment? 2 weeks is too long. Let's try 1 week. 1 week is too long, 3 hours. You try to reduce the experiments to the minimum so that the threshold is lower and lower. And then they decide, let's do it. Okay. The important thing is safe to fail experiments, right? And obviously, safe to fail is all relative, right? You can imagine lately, I don't know if you've seen SpaceX, right? That, brought to the extreme. Now you have like this kind of dual world, right? I'm sure they're using lean for a lot of stuff. I'm definitely know for sure they're doing experimentation and rapid experimentation for launching their stuff. They understand that they don't know what right is. They need to try it. Okay. They fail often. What's safe to fail is all relative. So at each retrospective, so on a cadence, basically, we always ask ourselves, what experiments did we agree to do? Which ones did we actually do? Because reality sometimes kicks in and, there's a million excuses. What did we expect to happen? What actually happened? Now we have a gap. What did we learn out of that gap? Before this meeting, we were just talking with Steve, right? We worked together in a company, and that was with a sales team, it turns out. And I think within 2 weeks, we helped them reach their target. All the experiments were successful. And as I was explaining, the only person who was not happy was me because we didn't learn anything, basically. I mean, I guess we made observations based on that. We created options. Based on those options, we did the right experiments. But often I find when some experiments fail, that's when we learn. And this is the point I'm trying to make in this slide. But some people fear failure. Why do you write an expectation? You're bound to fail. But the reality is like 40% of my own experiments fail. And if I don't fail enough, it means I'm not learning enough. I'm doing basically what I know I should be doing, right? And so we only really fail when we limit our opportunities to learn. So don't be afraid as well, like to set expectations that maybe are higher, I always put them in a positive kind of view. And basically is if we launch this experiment, this is what I expect. The nice thing about creating experiments as well is that you begin with the end in mind, really. You're designing the experiment before doing the actions, and you're creating then the actions in order to maximize the likelihood that that experiment succeeds. And I've done it for everything, including I remember once going, actually, I've been twice to the Dáil, the parliament, right, in Ireland, in Dublin, and even before like meeting a politician, like I was stopping and say, hold on a second, let's create an experiment. What we expect at the end of this meeting. And so our conversation was designed towards the end in mind. Everything else was fluff, right? We were just focusing on the outcome. So besides, and that's where the skateboarder principle comes in, where can you really learn if you're not prepared to fail? If any of you, maybe in your youth, did any skateboarding at all, you understand that people sitting on the bench never fail, but they are the ones who are looking at their life passing by. That's it. You need to be able to prepare to fail. So, sometimes I was in a company, a big, large American company, a while ago, and I had a keynote. I was the external keynote speaker. But before that, there was just the main manager who was talking to everybody, like saying failure is not an option. And I was thinking, ooh, this is going to be fun, I guess, with what I might prepare to say. I guess failure is an option as long as it's safe to fail, right? It's not fail fast, fail often. It's learn fast, learn often. This is what the failure really is, right? Okay, so, but rather than just survive uncertainty, we want to exploit it. Okay, and this is one point that I would like to maybe to really to emphasize here that crucially, some things gain from disorder, it turns out. This is Nicholas Taleb, who wrote a book called Antifragile. Well, he wrote a lot of books that basically say the same thing, but Antifragile is the most famous one, and basically says there's an asymmetry test. Anything that has more upside than downside from random events or certain shock is anti-fragile. The reverse is fragile. Let me give you an example. So we take a glass. Yeah. If I give an external shock, it will break. That's fragile. The opposite of that is not robust. Robust is like rubber, is a dam, right? I push on it and it stays the same up to a certain point, of course, right? Anti-fragile, it looks pretty much the more I shake it, the better it becomes. You would say, well, what are the examples of anti-fragile? There's actually plenty of examples in nature, for example, where if you think about our bodies, right? If we exercise, the body overcompensates and we become better, right? We build muscles, we become more agile. And it turns out for this kind of system, natural systems, we actually need a little bit of shocking, right? Otherwise, we perish basically, right? So we need a little bit of shocking. And that's the idea, right? So we want to be anti-fragile. And so is this kind of idea of small bets, big payoffs. There are some experiments that are they may have certain gains, but they are actually anti-fragile to the possibility that a big outcome, big payoff will come. Basically, you could say we could introduce this, but let's say it may fail. This method, this approach may fail, but imagine if it didn't. What would be the upside of this, right? And let's make it even more close to us, right? Your regular participation to these Dublin Event Network sessions, and I don't mean mine, right? I mean in general. If you come regularly, it's an example of how you can use variability, option asymmetry, and time to your advantage. So Steve invited me today, and honestly, in the last few years, I've been admittedly working in a different field than yours, right? Slightly different field than yours. Although I have a strong background in lean, don't let's not forget that, right? But the fact is, I'm coming from a different background, and I'm pretty sure you have speakers that do come from a different background. And the thing is, right, if you regularly come to these events, you can imagine this, right? So you go to an event, and based on maybe the title, maybe on the name of the person, the description, you're placing a bet, really, right? Good quality session, good value for you, your small bet paid off. Okay, let's assume this is the case. But then, quite arguably, you could have like a lot of negative ones where basically you wasted your time. Okay. And the thing is, like, it doesn't really matter if the quality of the session is good or bad. It actually does not depend on me. It depends on you. I mean, I can do all I can to ensure that the quality is really good. However, honestly, if I went to a session and someone talked about pregnancy, she might be the best speaker in the world. I'm not planning to be pregnant anytime soon, right? So it's not for me. There's no value. It would be a waste of time. Maybe I could find value in some other aspects, maybe the delivery or whatever. But generally wise, you may assume that in this moment of my life it's not the right thing. So I wasted some time. But it's a safe to fail experiment, right? It's a small cost. And so you go back and forth and you have a number of small experiments. Some fail, some gain. Basically, if you fast forward maybe a year, you forgot absolutely everything of what any of us said, in all these months. So basically, they're probably all failures. You waste your time, right? But they're safe to fail experiments. However, you're anti-fragile to the possibility that you meet someone, a talk, a conversation, a follow-up, something. You basically you get a black swan event and with a huge payoff, something that changes your career. Okay, maybe a different way of thinking, whatever that is. And it's hard to predict in advance, and it's actually rare. Fun enough, a couple of weeks ago, I was doing a keynote to a company in New Zealand, and they were saying you should change it to white swan to white swans because we have plenty of black swans over here. However, that's the point, right? It's the exception. And the thing is, like, you cannot predict it. You cannot predict it. I cannot know if Bach and Flow is good for you or not. There's just no way. So you cannot predict it. However, you are exposed to that possibility. Okay, so right from the beginning, I knew that Park and Flow was different because I saw once troubled teams being able to handle 5 to 10 change experiments each week. Quickly, which 10 experiments is not normal, okay, but it's usually 3 to 5. But I actually got and work with people like that. Quickly negotiate, change, and converge to success. This is what I like to talk about. I don't know perfection, but I know how to converge to it. Okay, so not all my experiments will be valuable. It's change. I'm changing. Obviously, I'm trying to be coherent with the problems that we have, but we're talking about convergence here. And Park Flow is like an alien technology, really. If you've seen Total Recall, instead of the oxygen in Mars, I'm pressing this, and what you have is popcorn, right? So each popcorn there is an experiment, basically, right? Which I use to terraform organizations because the dominant mindset can be hacked, and the key is to study human nature. I don't have much time to explain this, but it's basically this is what I call the elevator effect, right? I've seen this candid camera, it's 50 years old or something, where basically you have an actor and all the other ones are, sorry, they're all actors and one victim. They all enter the elevator and they all turn their body, opposite sides. And the guy just looks around and does the same, right? And then they turn again a different side of the elevator, looks around, does the same. Or enters with a hat. They all have a hat. They take the hat down. It does the same copies. And the nature, I learned that actually we were in the Leadership for Growth program in Ireland because we were high potential for growth. I learned it through Stanford. And the morale there was that we're all different, but we're powerfully influenced by the environment around us. And so I kind of realized that it's our then mantra, it should be our um, responsibility as managers, leaders, mothers, fathers to create the conditions for people to grow, to create that elevator, right? And basically, that's even with Park and Flow, I created some, and I observed also patterns basically to disrupt the status quo within an organization, okay, to introduce change gradually, but then it becomes very quickly exponential. And I would like you to imagine a continuous flow of experiments to accelerate the rate of change in every corner of your organization, okay? Because, with Steve, we just mentioned sales, right? I talked about software development. We just talked about other elements, and it could be absolutely in operational excellence as well, part of those problems, basically. So imagine to change, the rate of change in every corner of your organization, how far would you go? That to me is the potential out of this. So anyways, we have like slow and steady wins the race, continuous improvement, PDSA, go slow to go fast. It's all good. And then we have versus the hare. It's a different hare though. It's a complexity thinking here. So instead of continuous improvement, I'm talking about continuous change. Instead of PDSA, I'm talking about park and flow. Instead of slow to go fast to learn faster, right? Lean and system theories, complexity theories, this theory about this absorb complexity, subjectivity. Remember, I don't talk about facts, I'm talking about shared opinions, and we may be wrong, in fact, but we are aware of that. So we are wrong. We are in the possibility of being wrong. We will run experiments and eventually change direction if we realize it. Instead of an investigator, you need to become an explorer, really. And instead of easier, better, faster, and cheaper, is different, evolve and disrupt. Now, I'm saying a lot of it in spats, but really, it's really like it's our hair in the fable there, where the fable is not finished, and the hare comes back and says, "I learned my lessons, and now let's have a rematch." Dear tortoise. But I don't want to make it a versus because I have two lives, right? And so it's an and. Depending on the domain in where you are, there's a place for both. And today, Park on Flow is entering more organizations, and some teams hire Park on Flow to radically improve their retrospective and reach operational excellence. Managers hires it to, in a very visual way, to better communication. Corporate boardrooms, when you have like real options, basically your emerging strategies, right? You don't design a strategy from beginning to end. You, based on what you know, you become exploring some options, keeping them open. You close the experiments, you launch the experiments, but you keep the other options open, basically. Startups use it to achieve problem solution fit. We're late, so I don't want to spend a lot of time, but the idea there is, again, we want to understand the problem. We define a concept, we create an offer. I didn't build anything yet. I create landing pages based on that. Basically, I see what the reaction is. Then we create MVPs, basically, where we focus on activation, retention, and referral. So few customers, a crappy product. The product evolves over time when these three elements are working. Yeah. When the product is called sticky. Basically, when I enter the product, I remain attached to it, because I like to think about a product like a bucket full of holes, really, and your customers are the water. You flush the customers on the bucket. If you do it too early, you pay for a lot of advertisement too early, they flush out, and basically you wasted a lot of money. So what you want to do is few customers who give you a lot of feedback. You find where the holes are, you cover them. Once you have the buckets ready, that's when you spend a bazillion in Google Ads, and then you make revenue. If you do it too early, you're wasting your time. Touching lives, even outside the business world, families, schools, and more. And I'll finish with this story. 1 minute. December 25, 2020, Santa brings me a VR headset, MetaQuest 2. I have a 3 now, but in my sitting room, I get addicted to virtual table tennis. And in my quest for domination, I get in shape and lose 17 kilograms. That was in COVID time. Okay. So when most people were gaining weight, I lost it. So then I became cocky and said a few months later, I joined a real club. And of course, the club, 20% there are Chinese. Humbling experience. As a player, I realized I totally suck. And so, but the club website sucks even more. So the owner pretty much says, "Claudio, can you help?" That's not my job. I work in innovation, but whatever. But then, after a while, I kind of look at it, problems, declining membership, limited visibility. There's a lot of stuff, basically, right? And so I said, okay, let's help. So for my own sanity, I start with a website. I rebuild it in this way. There's some logic behind that. Again, in my spare time, I gradually create simple tools to minimize the time that it's needed to create tournaments. Then in a weekend, I create a rating system, and then we have, as an experiment, basically. Then it goes live. It works really well. A lot of people take notice. People start coming from all over Europe to compete. Sponsors take notice, and boom, the new landing page quickly tops Google searches. We have 3 times the membership, and basically, cherry on top, we become a new club of the year 2022. The MVP continues, and there's a lot of pros. I'm trained by the very best coaches around. This is Ho Ji-wen, is being the one at the bottom 4 times in the Olympics. Whatever. But anyways, I suck even marginally less. This January even became a table tennis coach, level 1, which is for kids. I know Stephen won't be annoyed if I say this is proof that those who can't do teach. Playing well is overrated. Whatever. Just kidding, of course. But table tennis coach, really? Yeah, I even became a coach. But the mega con is now I have 300 plus people who think I can fix their computer. Continuous evolution is a way of life. Mutant exists and are among us because when you start this continuous change, the world around you changes. And I said once, every single week, I'm 5 experiments older. When you'll die, how old would you rather be? 2 experiments old or 20,000? Final thoughts. In times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. And so we live in turbulent times indeed, and it's awesome because once you know how to exploit this variability, you go to Australia to ride the most majestic waves. And with this, thank you.
Thanks, Claudio.
Thank you.
I know we're a few minutes over time, but
yeah, sorry about that.
That was brilliant. And I know there's a few people still on, but we do need to wrap up a few. Just very quickly, have we any questions from the people still on the line? Hope you found that interesting. Just trying to change my view here, sorry. So I hadn't seen that presentation, and I know most of those drawings are your own.
That I'm wrong on most of those.
The drawings, yeah, most of them are
yeah, my own. Yeah. Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, for me, I actually took some notes there of things that you said. I think, okay, that's made me think again. And I really like the little experiment kind of preamble, to actually write down what you're expecting to come out. We often talk about 4 C's. So what are you concerned about? What do you think is causing it? What are you going to do about it? And then you check and see if it's worked. But I like yours better.
Yeah, in Lean as well, what happens is you will find a lot of there's a book actually called I can't remember actually, but Small Kaizen anyways, right? Something around Small Kaizen basically. And they are experiments. The only issue I had with that was that we often find experiments, we write them in isolation on a separate piece of paper, where actually I have, we create an experiment board that's very visible and it's there all the time. It's a continuous flow of experiments, basically, right? And the other thing is the underlying theory is not scientific. I want to be, totally upfront with that. It's not scientific, right? When we talk about opinions, we're not scientific. And so the underlying nature of how we're doing things and the reason why we can be so fast is exactly that I'm happy with opinions because my goal is to move you. Sometimes you have maybe a number of options. We may decide, and I may agree to go maybe not with the best option that I think is best, and I have a lot of experience, so sometimes I'm a few steps ahead, right, of the people I'm working with. But we experiment as long as the experiment is coherent with the problem. Even if it's not the best experiment of the group that we identified, I'm okay with that as long as the entire team is happy with that, right? Because it's like popcorn, really. You put the seeds on the pan. At the beginning, it's hard to launch an experiment, but then it becomes easier and easier, and then you have those 10 experiments or 5 experiments or whatever. It becomes second nature. The mindset of the people changes.
I'm going to wrap up. We're a little bit late. I found it excellent. We will put the recording up on the website. We run it by you if there's anything in there that you don't want us to share.
No, it's fine.
But can I thank you again? I found it really, really, really useful again. Great to come back to your stuff every once in a while, and maybe we'll do it again in some future date. And I believe you might have a change coming up in the new year. So if you do, wish you all the very best with that.
Yeah,
and thank you very much.
Definitely coming.
Thanks, Claudio.
Yeah. Thank you so much. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.